Welcome to BigCountry.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is our Countdown to Two-A-Days series, our daily look at an area football team and the key questions we're going to be answering about that team in our August 17th preseason football preview here at Big Country Preps. I'm with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, we're going to be talking about a team that we think will take a major step forward this year, the Stamford Bulldogs.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to be very bullish on this Stamford squad. Obviously, they only finished 3-7 a year ago, but they returned 16 of their 20 lettermen from that team. A lot of really young guys that got some really valuable experience. Among those, 8 offensive starters and 9 defensive starters are back for Coach Britt Hart. And they're going to have reinforcements from a 9-1 JV team. So this should be a really strong Stamford team and one that I think has an opportunity to build some momentum early and really get rolling. It's going to be fun to watch and see what Coach Hart can do with this group because they do have quite a bit of talent. Both at the senior class, and they've got several really strong sophomores who played last year as freshmen. So it's going to be fun to see how this team develops.
The one question I would have about them is a lot of their skill talent, their key skill talent, is still young. Caston Vega is only a sophomore. Christian Duran, quarterback, he's only a sophomore. So some of their key personnel, skill-wise, is still quite young, but they should be strong up front. And one thing that they do have going in their favor when you have a young group of skill personnel, they have a wing T offense, an explosive wing T offense, but they're capable of killing a lot of clock and taking pressure off those young kids. And they should be considerably better than they were a year ago.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about that is when you look at some of those sophomore kids that are going to be playing big roles for them. You mentioned Duran, you mentioned Vega. Case Beeson was a kid who played a lot of quarterback for him last year as a freshman. A lot of these kids are kids that have been, standout players from in other sports as well. They had a really good freshman class that kind of led their baseball team of a lot of these same names that are coming over. So they've while they don't have a ton of experience in terms of age, they've actually played in high pressure situations, which I think will benefit them. So that's going to be fun. I think last year was a really valuable experience for them, even though the record wasn't necessarily what they'd liked. Those guys got a ton of time on the field, got a ton of, learning experience. And this year, I think they're going to be maybe in a little bit better position to kind of put that to use in terms of winning football games.
And there's another thing too, to consider, even though they were young last year, and they still posted a 9-1 JV record. So there's an influx of young talent also that'll be coming up to fill holes at the varsity level. So this team hasn't peaked by any stretch of the imagination. We just expect them to take a step forward this year based on numbers. I think they will, but a 9-1 JV, you got to like that.
Yeah, and I think the neat thing for them too is I think they're at a point as a program where last year they had to throw a lot of those freshmen into the fire in terms of big situations to where they were playing major roles as freshmen. I think maybe some of these freshmen will be able to step in and kind of be more complementary parts, which I think will help everybody. So I think this year's team, a lot of talent in those 2 younger classes, the freshmen and sophomores, but they won't be leaning quite as much on first-year players this year as they were last year because a lot of those other guys are moving into leadership roles.
And how good is your young talent when you've got some of them up on varsity already and your JV still goes 9-1? There's a lot of young talent coming up, and Coach Britt Hart should have that program in pretty good shape here in the very near future.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's easy to forget just, when you have a couple of down seasons, just how good Stamford was for how long. This is a program that is basically had talent running through that system for a very long time. And it looks like they've got a couple of classes in that freshman and sophomore class that could lead them to some pretty special things. Of course, there are some challenges in their way in that district of theirs. You're sharing a district with Cisco and Hawley, 2 teams that I think are hoping to perhaps even get to a state championship game. But I think this Stamford team is poised to make a serious step forward this year.
All right, let's take a look at the Stamford schedule. Let's jump into the non-district portion. As always, they're going to be facing their arch rival, the Hamlin Pied Pipers. That'll be on the road to open things up on August 26th. Then they play host to Haskell, another area rival, on the 2nd. They'll have a long road trip down to Ballinger on September the 9th before finishing off with Arlington Pantego Christian on the 16th of September. That is an independent school to close out the non-district portion of their schedule.
They open this year with a couple of winnable games versus Winters at home and at Olney before they have their open date. And they come back to play Cisco at home, at Anson, Hawley at home, and they finish up their regular season at Colorado City. So I think you look at this schedule in non-district. I think there's a lot of opportunities for some wins to maybe build some momentum going into district. And then in district, obviously you've got those toughies waiting for you with Cisco and Holly both at home. But I think that there are a lot of opportunities for wins for the Stamford team and to get back in that playoff mix and to really have a nice season.
One of the crucial games, if we're going to pick a game that's most important for Stanford, if you take the position that Cisco and Holly are the league favorites and favored over everybody in the league, if you take that position, then suddenly Stanford's most important game of the year, in my opinion, becomes that home opener in district play against Winners on September the 23rd. And if they hold serve and get off to a good start and win that ball game, and Winners is going to be one of those contenders for that fourth spot. There's no doubt about it. Or even the third spot. If they hold serve there, then more than likely they're going to get in. At that point, they have to split one of two road games at Anson or Olney. I think Winners, if they win that one, they're going to be in pretty good shape to grab a playoff spot.
And I really look
Maybe
at
the
each
third
of those.
seed.
Yeah, and I really look at each of those two games before their open date as big games. You mentioned the Winters game, which will be a very big one for them. I think that game at Olney's a big one as well. If you can get off to a 2-0 start to district, you're in pretty good shape for a playoff spot. And then you finish up with a couple of games later on the road where it takes a little bit of pressure off you, if just in terms of making the playoffs. And then obviously you've got Cisco and Holly, and you're going to give it your best and see what happens. But those teams, I think it is fair to say those two are the district favorites. But this Stamford team is slowly inching its way back into that conversation. I think they've got a good group and some really young kids that are really special athletes.
I look at the Winners game as the most important, because if they do not hold serve at home and win that ball game, their margin for error is out the window. Yeah. That's why I look at the Winners game as the most important one on Stanford's schedule in terms of snagging a higher playoff spot.
Yeah, and then the interesting thing about that is if you do drop that game, you've got to win 3 road games at that point to feel good about your company, because you're going to Olney, you're going to Anson, you're going to Sea City. So their schedule is an interesting one, but I agree with you. I think that Winter's game is going to be a big one. It'll be a very big game for them.
And with that, it's about time to wrap up tonight's edition of the Countdown to Two-A-Days series, the Stamford Bulldogs. But before we do that, we want to remind you, we've got 3 separate subscription packages here at bigcountrypreps.com. We've got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual 6-month subscription. We knocked that price down to $4 a month. And then we've got an annual 12-month subscription where we knocked that price down to $3 a month, $36 for a full year of Big Country high school athletic coverage. And keep in mind, even with high inflation, our prices have stayed the same.
We'd also like to remind you before we close out this episode of our Countdown series to make sure you do check out our August 17th preseason football preview. There will just be a ton of local and area football content. You will not want to miss that. In the meantime, thank you for joining us for this episode of our Countdown to Two-A-Days series. And make sure you join us again tomorrow when we will be talking about the Winters Blizzards here at bigcountrypreps.com.